The views and opinions expressed in this program are not meant to alarm anyone, but merely start an intelligent discussion about an interesting phenomenon, the possibility that an intelligent alien life form does exist and is actively making contact with the Earth.
And if there's no physical evidence, no page stolen from the captain's log, no scraping of alien metals that our metallurgists can look at, no photography done by several independent people of things that could only be extraterrestrial spacecraft, if there's nothing like that, then I say anecdotal stories don't count.
I began to get certain doubts because not so much of any specific case, although there were quite a few, it was the people themselves. I said to myself, well, now, come on, how much longer am I going to call these people crazy? And when I changed my glasses, you might say, a little bit, and took a view that maybe these people aren't crazy, and began to realize what sort of people they were, the people who would be accepted in any court of law as a witness, let's say, good, solid people, I said to myself, well, the time has come to maybe change my attitude.
But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Here you can see an object moving behind a windmill here. Right there, it disappears into a cloud just before it goes behind this windmill. Clouds that day were at 25,000 feet, cirrus clouds. You know where the camera was put, you know the distance to the windmill. You can determine its size by looking at the image size here. Go through some trigonometry, and you'll find out that that UFO was about 10 miles away, up at 25,000 feet. And the size works out to about 500 feet long and doing 14,000 miles an hour, which is, again, nothing that a conventional aircraft is capable of doing.
Hi, good evening and welcome to UFO Update Live. My name's Terry Endres. As our opening segment pointed out, scientists are pretty much divided over the issue of UFOs. But what we do notice all too often is that the naysayers are usually the ones who aren't doing the investigating. Carl Sagan is a prime example, which is why we're kind of picking on him in our opening segment. He makes a broad, sweeping statement indicating that there is no evidence to be studied, and that anecdotal stories aren't enough. Well, in the best cases, and some of those we're going to look at tonight, the anecdotal evidence is well supported by physical traces. So, the thing we're going to show you is that science, and good science, is being done on UFOs. To help me in this endeavor tonight, I have with me Pat Packard, who is the president of the Associates for Scientific Knowledge, and an associate of ours, investigator and researcher, Chris Coffey. And I welcome you both here tonight.
Thank you,
and let's get into this a little bit. In a sense, I think some of Carl Sagan's remarks are misdirected or for whatever purpose. And he seems to have a pretty good record of doing this. Can you shed some light on this for us, Pat?
Misdirected, what I would tell you is Carl Sagan has been extended invitations a number of times and has accepted those invitations to go on investigations, good investigations, and when it came to crunch time, he backed out over and over again. In fact, many of the things he says in the opening there are simply not true, and we have tapes tonight that are, some of them, 15 years old or older that show that they're not, it's not true what he has to say. You know, we have metal, we've recovered metal. It's been analyzed by one of the most prestigious scientific groups in the world.
Right.
We have extraordinary amount of photography. It was on our last show if anyone saw that one. It's been analyzed by the latest computer techniques and other things. There's landing, not crop circles, but landing traces. We've got samples of that. There's medical evidence, forensic evidence, radar evidence, studies have been done in the field, and we'll talk about some of those, and we have some on tape tonight, and you know that it would take months to go through all the evidence.
Absolutely. So I guess I'm still stuck with why the kind of response that we get from folks like Carl Sagan when there is indeed extensive study and evidence to indicate at least that something unusual is happening with the UFO phenomenon. Chris, what do you think? I mean, what is it with folks like Carl Sagan? We saw Hynek, who is clearly every bit the scientist that Carl Sagan, or was, I should say, since he's passed away, but Hynek was every bit the good scientist that Carl Sagan was. In fact, Hynek, was he not originally very skeptical?
He was skeptical, and then he, turned the tables, and, you have to take a look at all the people, that all the sightings and the landing traces. Carl Sagan, he's one that seems to be, he's high profile, and what he says is sacred, so people look up to what he has to say. So
we might say it's a question of attitude.
Right.
Because I think Dr. Hynek had mentioned that it was, he realized that it was his attitude that was getting in the way, that he couldn't continue to look at these people as being crazy,
right,
or lying for that matter.
You just have to look at the overwhelming evidence
right.
of all the people and their sightings and all the landing traces.
And landing traces, that's I guess, sort of a label that's put on a number of trace cases where something in the environment has been physically disturbed. In some cases, I believe tree branches have been broken in proximity to what appears to be some kind of a depression in the ground. Landing circles, then, is probably one of the things we can start with, because there have been some extensive studies done regarding landing circles, and I think we can get into that tape right now so that our audience can appreciate the amount of work that goes into this.
This is a photograph of a UFO landing site. Ted Phillips of Sedalia, Missouri, seen here examining a UFO-affected area, is acknowledged as the world expert on the physical traces found at UFO landing sites. Mr. Phillips is a research associate of the Center for UFO Studies and has conducted specialized research on the physical traces found at UFO landing sites for the past 9 years. The results of his research are files on over 1,480 UFO landings from 59 countries. Mr. Phillips has personally investigated over 500 UFO sightings and visited over 300 UFO landing sites.
These are soil samples taken from 5 recent UFO landing sites and are fairly representative of some 200 to 300 UFO landing sites that I have personally been involved with.
This is a small portion of the soil taken from a UFO landing site in Delphos, Kansas. The soil in the UFO landing ring is extremely dehydrated and is unable to absorb water. Instead, it simply floats. Soil taken only a few feet away that was not part of the UFO landing ring behaved normally. Within a few seconds, it absorbed the water that we poured on it. Besides being unable to absorb water, UFO-affected soil cannot support seed germination and plant life. Soil taken a few feet away does support normal plant growth. Each of the pins in this map represents a UFO landing site that has been reported to Ted Phillips in the last 8 years. There are over 150 UFO landing sites represented on this map.
I've investigated a rather high percentage of these reports personally and have found a remarkable consistency in size and shape regarding the UFO scene and the ground effects resulting from that UFO landing. We find imprints left evidently by the landing gear of the object, some of these indicating tremendous pressure, great weight, generally found as 3 or 4 in number, arranged in either a triangular or rectangular pattern. We have effects on witnesses, such as the witnesses suffering what appears to be a sunburn effect on their face, neck, and hands, following the close approach of a UFO. Extreme dryness of the nasal area, extreme dryness of the throat. I have talked with nearly 2,000 people who have had a UFO experience. And those people certainly have convinced me that something very real is going on.
Well, I think that piece of video says a lot about the kinds of work that is being done by MUFON, QFOS, and other independent investigative teams. But it's not just isolated to just a few cases. He has a remarkable catalog, and this is simply a typical case, and the kinds of things that happen to the soil and the surrounding vegetation are actually consistent in many of these cases. Right. Can you give us a couple more cases that we can discuss here that indicate some kind of interaction with our environment?
Well, there's a number, and I think the best illustration is another piece of tape we'll have coming up here in just a little bit. Mm-hmm. But certainly in Rendlestad Forest, we've had broken tree branches, traces of what could have been radioactivity on the trees. There were pod marks that were 27 feet exactly apart, and so deep into the ground. We had physical sightings by people on the ground, captains, colonels. There were 33 odd witnesses in this particular case. We've had other cases, and one thing that is really fascinating in many of these cases where we have landing traces or see something take off and there's a landing trace left there, we have electromagnetic effects, which have been studied by Dr. Rodiger and others, and there's thousands of cases of those that have been cataloged, and engines shutting off, static on the radio. There's all kinds of forensics in terms of the paint's burnt, tires are torn up, just a whole variety of things.
Yeah, I believe back in the mid-50s, the late 50s, there's a classic case of electromagnetic interference. It's called the Leibold, Texas case. And within a period of several hours, an object had stopped no less than 9 folks on the road, their engines stopping within proximity to the object. And of course, once the object departed, the engine responded normally. So there's clearly some kind of interaction going on here. Another case that sort of comes to mind, and it's one of the earlier cases where there's some kind of physical evidence at the site, and it's called the Scoutmaster, the Florida Scoutmaster case. Oh, yeah. Now, it's kind of a dubious case because the background of the primary witness was a little questionable, even though he was a Scoutmaster, and we should hope that that's a noble person. But he had a story where the object came down, he could feel the heat. In fact, his Scoutmaster's hat had been charred in several places, and he had what appeared to be like sunburn on his arms. At the site, nothing seemed to be too out of place, except when samples were taken of the sod. The grass on top was still lush and green, but the roots of the grass had been charred by some kind of charge, and it just it boggles the mind to think that this kind of energy is actually being making an impact on our planet. So there are plenty of these cases, and I think again it's overlooked by a lot of mainstream scientists, and you know we can't we can't say too many times. We just don't understand that. I mean, this is really a fascinating, these are fascinating cases.
The evidence is there, it's been compiled, cataloged, there's a clear pattern that's taken place. And we can learn quite a bit from this. Now, one of the criticisms we may get from running the first tape is, well, these are people inside the UFO community, you know. And, That's true, but you know, we have people that have looked at implants that are at major universities, and you know, people aren't aware of the fact that we have, I think, something like 10 implants that have been looked at now, and some of them at very prestigious universities. We have a picture of an implant. I don't know if they're going to be able to put it up here. From Houston, the UFO implant. And these implants are where people said they would be, and so forth and so on. So we do have some study in regard to implants now. But if you listen to people in the press or wherever, you wouldn't think there was any evidence at all.
Well, let's get back to the Pritchard case. Now, he is affiliated with what university?
He's with MIT, and there's no more prestigious technical university in the world. Now, this was not sponsored, I don't believe, directly by the university. But Dr. Pritchard is a physicist with MIT, and he looked into at least one of these cases. Now, the one, I don't know if they put it up or not.
Yeah, it's going to be run here in a minute.
Okay, that particular implant that you'll probably see on the home screen was looked at by the University of Houston. We have some other universities that have looked at them, and all of them say the same thing. We don't know what they are. We're not sure what it is. You know, it could be natural, or it could be, but you know, we don't know how it got there and what have you.
Well, let's go into that tape now and what findings were accrued.
Now, for the first time, scientists are able to analyze what may be direct evidence of alien contact with human beings. Dr. David Pritchard at MIT was the scientist chosen to analyze Richard's implant.
His recollection included physical information about this alleged implant, namely its rough size and the fact that it had little wires coming out of it, which he alleged were connected to him.
He took a number of photos that showed some of the wires, as I call them, that stick off of it. One of them has the black line onto it. This is the piece that I have that I mentioned before, and here you see the black line that's onto it.
And when I looked at it under a microscope, I saw these little, I call them appendages, which is a more neutral term than wires, sticking out of it, and I said, well, that confirms his story, at least it's consistent with his story. You know, I'll work on this.
See the layering here.
The artifact looked genuine, but what was it made of? Dr. Pritchard used a technique called mass spectrometry to find out. What were your findings?
You know, we could have found super heavy elements, or we could have found elements that are very rare on Earth, which would tend to suggest that perhaps this was made by extraterrestrials, and we didn't find any of those. We found absolutely nothing at that point that suggested that it was extraterrestrial, and all the evidence suggested that these were fragments of biological molecules that we were seeing.
Could extraterrestrials be crafting implants out of human biological materials, or are they nothing more than scar tissue? No matter what the explanation, thousands of people are convinced there is something strange inside their bodies, something terrifying.
No matter what an implant is, it's always going to go into debate if it's recovered. Could it be made on Earth? Could it be made with earthly materials? And the answer invariably is going to probably be yes. Consequently, it's never going to be a clear-cut situation. People want a sort of smoking gun implant. They want an artifact that will prove once and for all that the abduction phenomenon and the UFO phenomenon is real.
Here again, we have a study that finds evidence, physical evidence, that matches the anecdotal story. Again, the witness reports a sighting or some kind of interaction, and evidence is found to support that testimony. So we're not just relying on anecdotal stories. And in this case, unless this man has X-ray vision, he can't give a description of something inside his body unless he saw it outside his body first. So it was put there. It didn't necessarily grow there as a cyst or some other kind of anomaly, biological anomaly. Now, again, we have here a good case of some kind of physical interaction. Now, Chris, you mentioned before we went on air another case that kind of highlights these types of effects.
Yeah, the Cash Landrum case. That was Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum, and I can't remember if it's Vicki's grandson,
Right.
but all three of them were on a road, and they saw this UFO, I think, that was shaped like a diamond,
Right.
I believe. And then they stopped, and they got out of the car, and they had radiation burns after it. But Colby had saw 23 helicopters surround them. So the military was involved in that case. And they went to the hospital, and Vicky, I think, ended up with cancer.
Right. Right. I think they, all three of them have had some health problems since then.
And I think they've sued the government, too.
Right, they
from
tried
what
to
I-
sue.
They tried,
Yeah.
but it never
They
went
went in
anywhere.
camera, and they wouldn't release any information on what it actually was. But also in that case, we had forensic evidence on the dashboard. The dashboard had become so soft that it had an imprint, a hand imprint in it. We've had many other cases. The Australian case where numerous people observed a UFO lifting a car, dropping it. The suspension system was broken. The tires were useless when it was over with. The paint was burnt and peeled off. The people got scared to death, jumped out of the car and ran and hid in the bush. So, I mean, there's just innumerable cases that illustrate that this is not an anecdotal phenomena. We have physical evidence, and there are studies that have been done. There are other studies that are going to come up tonight. We've talked about Dr. Pritchard here in the university. The next thing I think on the list is a government study by the French, and they were very skeptical. There's a very skeptical division of the gendarme that did this study, and they thoroughly looked at it and came back with some interesting conclusions. But there are some other fascinating cases. I'm sure you might want to bring another one up. I don't know.
Well, the Cache Landrum was a good example, and again, we have testimony, which in this case I think was supported by an independent witness. I think a retired sheriff or an off-duty sheriff who was on a parallel expressway or road, who had also seen the helicopters. Now, of course, the military kept denying that the helicopters were even present, but clearly there's some independent verification. But again, we have testimony and we have physical effects. So one supports the other, and we're not just dealing with a bunch of stories told by excitable people. You know, often the last thing these people are expecting is some kind of encounter with an unusual object.
Right, and this is the age of forensics. I mean, we can go out there and we send people out, and we don't have the money. But if we did have the money, just a little bit of government funding, we could certainly tell a myriad of things from the forensic capabilities we have today.
Well,
and we can tell quite a bit from what we've found, and there's no question that the physical evidence supports their stories time and time again, and the studies have been done over and over again to support them. So.
Well, the last government-funded UFO project in this country was a dismal failure. Back in the late 60s, when the University of Colorado was contracted by the government to study UFOs, you know, of course they came out with a negative conclusion, but the more fascinating aspect of that case was that over 30% of the cases they studied, they could not come up with a reasonable explanation. Now, if you look at standard scientific practice, something becomes significant when it happens maybe 5 to 3% of the time. And that seems like a small amount, but it's significant. Here we have something within the context of a scientific study where the occurrence of a phenomenon exceeds significance by 10 factors.
Well, there's no question from the memos we got from the Condon Committee that it was no way near a fair examination of the evidence. The conclusions did not match the body of the report. And there were 4 or 5 multiple radar cases listed in there they could not explain. There were other cases that they could not explain, right on through 30%, as you say. And it's ludicrous. The conclusions were ludicrous. And of course, they used that as an excuse to close Blue Book.
Wasn't that a setup, though? I mean, the Condon report, you know, from what I heard, it was to, you know, to appease the public. And say that they're looking into it, just like Project Blue Book. You know,
it was an excuse to knock off Blue Book.
It looked like they're, you know, doing their job and looking into these cases because of all the phone calls of seeing, you know, these UFOs. But
oh yeah, it was in a sense a whitewash.
They came
and
to a conclusion.
what it did establish, though, is of course in the political world, the study has been done. We have found no evidence, even though if we look at the study, we find it flawed. But if we appeal to the government and say, well, let's have another study, they'll say, no. We've done that. We've spent our money on that. So it's odd that in a situation like this, that would happen when we can come up with any number of redundant studies that have cost millions of dollars, other than UFOs. Now, you had mentioned the Trans-En-Provence case, and that's another good physical trace case. But I think the point here is that it has...
the point is that the French government had an arm of the gendarme, which is their police force. It studied this. It's called SEPRA, and I think we should go ahead and probably roll the tape on this. It's a fascinating case. They're all very skeptical, and when they're done, they know they have a tiger by the tail, so to speak. So
let's take a look at that.
Let's go ahead and roll it if we can.
Meet Jean-Jacques Velasco, a recognized scholar in the study of optics and an engineer at the prestigious National Center for Space Research, which is the equivalent of NASA in the United States. He is in charge of SEPRA, the organization which investigates atmospheric phenomena and UFOs for the French government.
These only have eyewitness accounts. They have no other corroboration.
May I ask you a question?
Of course.
Do you believe any of this?
No.
But we've had hundreds of reported sightings.
All atmospheric phenomena explained by natural causes.
So why do we continue?
If we are to be taken seriously, our efforts must use rigorous scientific methods, even if we never come up with anything.
So all this could be an exercise in futility.
Yes, that's right.
In the countryside of Trans-En-Provence, Renato Nicolai was about to have an experience that would give Velasco the evidence he was waiting for.
That day, it was about 5 o'clock in the evening. I was working in the fields when I saw a strange object. I tried to get closer. I was about 30 meters from it when I saw it. Only when it took off, 30 or 40 seconds later, could I really notice its shape and form.
See? What did do that?
We should call the police.
And how large was it?
It's no big, maybe 3 meters across, 1.5 meters high.
I see. Have you ever seen anything like this before, sir?
Never.
You are perhaps interested in UFO?
Well, what, are you crazy? It just landed, it killed my onions, and it left. So I call you, that's all, okay?
Of course. Thank you, sir. Well, the witness appears legitimate.
Look at the ground.
Yes. After we have taken our samples, no one touches anything until the government space research team gets here.
Meet Michel Bounias. He holds advanced degrees in engineering, biochemistry, and statistics. He is a director of research and a university professor. He has contributed to an estimated 200 scientific articles in over 50 international journals. He has written 4 books and received numerous honors and awards, including laureates from the Academy of Sciences and the Biological Society.
Michel Bougnat, s'il vous plaît.
Michel Bougnat.
Hello, Michel. This is Jean-Jacques Velasco.
Ah, comment ça va?
Ça va bien. What have you got?
Well, I'm getting some unusual results. I want to investigate this further. I'll go down there myself tomorrow to take some samples.
Come see me when you are finished.
Yes, of course.
Au revoir.
Professor Bougnat and his assistants flew to Trans-En-Provence to obtain soil and plant samples.
It is probably the first time that after a very well characterized event concerning a UFO, there was a full scientific study showing that some changes were brought to the plants near the place where the UFO landed, and that these biochemical changes were decreasing with increasing distances from the trace, so that all the findings, the biochemical findings, could be put into equations and be mathematically characterized in a very accurate way. Then these findings were compared with the same result obtained several years later, so that these controls led us to realize that on the same area, 2 years after the event, all the findings, all the things were recovering a normal shape, a normal pattern of biochemical characteristics.
Velasco realized from the evidence obtained from Bougnat that this case was extraordinary and could not be dismissed as a hoax. He continued to examine all possibilities. Bougnat had checked with the military and had been assured that no military prototypes had been in the area.
With an electromagnetic force.
Is there any chance of a hoax? Could someone duplicate the effect by other means?
No one knew what soil samples I would take, what tests I would run. There were no samples of herbicide in the soil, no traces of anything man-made. If someone wanted to create this, they would need more years of study than you and I have together. And they'd also have to have a greater knowledge of toxic compounds than exist anywhere. Still not sure, are you?
I'm a scientist.
The lab results were astounding. Based on the way the ground was impacted, whatever had landed that day in Renato's garden weighed 3.5 to 5 tons and had heated the soil to an extreme temperature of 1100 to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit.
So it's now possible to say that in time and in distance, all the biochemical findings are consistent with the description given by the witness. And it is probably the first time in the world, to my knowledge, that such a complete set of data has been obtained on such cases of UFO landing.
The stringent scientific government investigation has continued for the past 10 years. The results are now being published, all of which conclude that the evidence is consistent with what Renato Nicolai saw and cannot be explained by other natural causes. In other words, a UFO did land in Trans-En-Provence.
Well, I guess the best way to describe that case is extraordinary. And remember, that's what Carl Sagan is asking for, extraordinary evidence to support the extraordinary stories. And clearly, what else can that be called? Here we have a case that can actually be reduced to mathematics, which is the language of science. And after all their work, the lab results indicate that whatever occurred wasn't anything we could identify as a natural earthly happening.
To his claim that there's nothing in scientific journals,
right.
The question is he ever going to look? Because there are others we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think right now we can talk about, we've talked about universities, we've talked about this into the government, and now we've got a complete government study that was done.
But do you think we could synthesize the element that they found from the landing trace?
Well,
if somebody wanted to perpetuate a hoax.
Yeah, again, they've sort of eliminated that. They've no pesticides, and whoever did perpetrate the hoax would have to have a more profound knowledge of toxicology.
The one thing they don't tell you is that this man passed all kinds of tests, not only psychological testing, but his reputation. They could find no one that would say anything other than he was one of the most honest people they'd ever met, never told a lie, so forth and so on. So that's one of the elements that they wanted and that they had. I'm not sure if there was a second witness from a bridge that saw a UFO traveling in that direction at the same time. Now, you know, it may not have been the same one, but it was more evidence, at least anecdotal evidence, as our buddy Carl would say. But there's other things. Carl asked us for metal, and I guess he hasn't bothered to look to see this particular analysis.
Sure. We've got a tape rolling on some metal found in Russia,
right.
But there, historically, again, his pronouncement actually ignores the history of UFO study.
Right.
And there have been in the past, 40 years plus ago, metal fragments collected from a UFO sighting that couldn't be analyzed correctly. Well, they could be analyzed, but the results were such that
we couldn't produce
that metal. Although it was an earthly metal, titanium.
Right.
The actual casting was of a process that had not yet been invented in the 50s. Now, this case was occurred in Ubatuba, and I think back in the middle 50s. And the case itself, the sighting, was a UFO that seemed to be sort of wobbling in the air, and as it was gyrating, some kind of slag dropped out of the bottom of the craft, and then it sort of righted its trajectory and flew off. And that these samples then were collected at that site. And again, although it's titanium, which is an element that we can find here on Earth, the actual crystal structure of that solid evidence, was before its time. If we want to say this was actually hoaxed, then it required again a hoaxer who had some kind of advanced knowledge that wasn't even privy to our top scientists at the time. So,
this slag that you talk about, what is that made up of? Is it similar to like what they call angel hair?
No, angel hair is a little different. The slag would be like a molten metal.
Just a chunk of metal.
Yeah, a chunk of metal. And angel hair, I believe, is sort of a fibrous.
It's a fiber that disappears, usually dissipates as it comes down. It looks like straw or something, for lack of a better, thin thread, I guess, is a better description.
Has that been reported in very many cases?
It's been collected. I don't know if anyone's had long enough to analyze it.
Yeah, because typically
it just sort of dissipates.
Yeah,
before
evaporates. Anybody can analyze it. But again, part of the tragedy with some of the analyses that need to be done is that the actual piece of evidence has to be destroyed in order to collect the readings that you need. And so this metal is no longer available to us. But we do have cases, I think, now that are being studied where we do have pieces of metal.
Absolutely. Well, this particular one we're going to show here in just a second was done by a government, and the top scientific arm of that government, one of our old nemesises, our arch rival, Russia.
Yeah.
So, it's called Hill 611. We want to go ahead and roll it now, you think?
Yeah, let's go take a look at that, because
roll 611.
Got some interesting analysis here.
A few miles away from Vladivostok, near the small mining town of Dolnogorsk, a UFO crashed on this hilltop in 1986. The site, known only by its height 611, is littered with strange debris and is considered to be one of the most significant UFO locations in all of Russia. The first person to reach the scene was biologist and Academy of Sciences Meteorite Commission member Valery Duzhilny.
Something was burning. This could have been a meteorite, but meteorites do not cause fires. When I climbed up to this place, the snow was deep. There I saw a place which left a great impression on me. There was no snow, it just evaporated. I saw the remains of a burnt tree and the remains of metallic spheres.
Samples of charred metal gathered at the site attracted nationwide attention. Analysis was done by Russia's most prestigious academies.
Whatever remained at the site itself had such unusual properties.
Paul Stonehill, head of the Russian Ufology Research Center headquartered in the United States, has examined many of the samples from Height 611.
The mesh itself had something very strange, very unusual, tiny filaments. And inside those filaments, quartz filaments, one could find yet other filaments or nettings, gold nettings, 7 microns thick. I mean, a human hair is 56 microns. Now, we have no technology to insert gold filaments of that size into quartz filaments. What they could be used for remains an enigma.
It's an enigma that continues to draw serious attention from Russia's top scientific researchers. In the case of samples collected by scientists at Height 611, the results are startling.
It could very well be physical evidence of an extraterrestrial origin. That was the conclusion of the initial scientific team that went to the site. There were strange alloys in there that couldn't be readily identified. Rare earth metals in combinations that have never been seen of a natural origin.
Here we can see the results of our tests. The sample contains elements such as lanthanum, nickel, and some others. But most importantly, it contains the element promethium. The element promethium is artificial. It cannot be found on the Earth.
Okay, so here again we have a case where an official body has come up with a conclusion that suggests that something unearthly has occurred.
Well, one thing we need to mention is not only has the Academy of Science done that, but there was a 10-year study done by the entire Russian military. And they had just tremendous evidence, all kinds of radar cases, and a case where they set a silo, a nuclear silo, ticking, set it off, or what have you. And they came to the conclusion that this is a real phenomenon. And that was sponsored by the government. The Belgian General de Bouwers says that this is an extraterrestrial case as far as he's concerned, what happened in Belgium in '89. We have the same type of thing with people who have been in Iran with the case there. We have a pattern. And this is not by any means all of the cases. We have two people say you can't study this. Well, in fact, we have field studies that have been done. Project Identification and Project Hestdalen in Norway. And both of them saw over 150 objects, had the latest equipment. Now, they were on the ground in a campsite and moving around, but they had ground radar, lasers, latest photography equipment. They had what, you name it, they had it. And the most curious part about it, not only did they catalog these, but these objects responded. When they had a laser light, they bounced the laser light off of them, and the laser came back. If they hit it 3 times, it came back, in some cases, 3 times. And we see the same kind of intelligent behavior in Belgium, where the object stops, goes ahead, stops, goes ahead, waits for the jets to catch up, so forth and so on. And Hestdalen and Project Identification were in scientific journals. So Carl Sagan needs to pick up a scientific journal at his local newsstand, open it up, and look at it sometime. So, I mean, that's, you know, we don't have time to go through study after study after study. We could go on for quite some time. It's just totally ludicrous for someone to imply that we don't have either already scientific studies in the can, or that we have the material. The radar material is just bountiful. 2,000 cases with Dr. Haynes. We have probably 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 electromagnetic cases with measurements involved with them, and you know, you can go on for quite a while. And the next thing is medical.
Yeah.
So you want
Now, Chris, you had some question about this case, Height 611, about this element.
I was wondering, though, if they did want to perpetuate a hoax, whoever, I don't know if the government could be behind that or what, but if somebody wanted to, I wondered if they could recreate that element and place it there.
That's always a distinct possibility in any case, that somehow evidence is planted or seeded. But I think there are other pieces of evidence in here that sort of exclude that.
Yeah, I think they mentioned in the clip there's a gold netting webbing that's like 7 milliliters or some microns.
Yeah.
Which your hair is 50 or 60 microns.
One-eighth the width of the hair.
And there's no way we could manufacture that and insert it in there, and this element he's talking about. So I don't see how. And even if something like that would be true in this case, still it requires someone to go out here and do the science. Our problem is scientists are telling us something they've never studied. Carl Sagan can tell us by means of telepathy or osmosis what's going on here without bothering to study the doggone case. And his job, I thought, was to go study the case and tell us, either why it's valid or why it's not valid. And that's all we're asking someone to do.
Well, before we get into our next clip, we've got a caller, and we can take a quick question here. Caller, give us your question.
Hello?
David, are you there?
Yes.
What's your question?
My main question is, with all the supporting evidence and, so many people seeing UFOs, why do you believe that the government tries to cover it up so much?
Well, I guess, that's pure speculation. But I would personally suspect that if the government finds it important enough to cover it up, then it must be a threat to the government. Maybe not so much a threat to the people, but maybe a threat to the government, that somehow letting us know that we're being visited by extraterrestrials is some kind of threat to the power structure in this country. So while we have ample anecdotal evidence to prove that these are not hostile contacts, scientific evidence, that these are not directly hostile, maybe indirectly by accident people get hurt, but the actions don't seem to be hostile. So if there's no real threat to the American public, why the cover-up? I can only assume that because it's information that would maybe threaten our power structure.
Let me make a quick comment. We've come to learn that in many of these high-profile cases where we have the longitude, latitude, minutes, seconds, etc., that the government has in fact scanned these things via satellite. And they're well aware of what's going on there. And so, but it's still a secret. They won't tell us what they scanned at that location. We know they scanned it, and now we're having trouble even getting that information out of them.
Well, now we need to get into our next roll-in here. A very extraordinary case. Again, there's that word extraordinary. We have in this case physical evidence on the ground and some injury done to the primary witness. It's the Stephen Michsisk case. Reliable photographic evidence. He's absolutely wrong. He is the type of guy, I think, who might be holding on to his own scientific beliefs in much the same way as some people hold on to religion. In a book he wrote some years ago called Cosmos, one comment he made about people who made incorrect conclusions was that intellectual brilliance is no guarantee against being dead wrong. And I think the detractors of UFO research should pay attention to that. I want to thank Pat and Chris for being with us tonight. A reminder, Pat, Peggy and Jerry Black's Abduction Encounter Group meets the 22nd of March at the Milford Library at 6:30 p.m. Also want to remind you that if you call, and they'll be showing a graphic, we'll send you a complimentary free issue of our newsletter. And if you need information about the Associates for Scientific Knowledge, call Pat. His number will be on the screen too. Now, if anybody finds or comes across some evidence that might be linked with UFOs, don't touch it. Mark the place so you know where to go back and get a hold of someone who will investigate it for you. Pat, myself, would be glad to come out and take a look. And before we go, let me remind you that we're here for a certain reason, to keep you informed, because the best defense against being fooled is being informed. Thanks for watching, and good night, everyone.